Sea Hags are underwater witches who get access to more magical power when in groups and are so gross that people die just by looking at them. Yeah, that's right, a CR2 creature has basically a weaker version of power word kill. And that's awesome. They're like Medusa, but instead of making you incredibly hard, they make you incredibly soft. And then dead. But most people don't use them, and that's probably because their encounters tend to take place underwater, and that's yet another set of rules to remember, and I get that. So I'll go over ideas for both underwater and above water Sea Hag shenanigans. Here is where you can find the basics about Sea Hags, but this video isn't about regurgitating the basics, it's about how to make them even better. So let's just get to it. Here's a bunch of ideas to help spice up your Sea Hags. Alright, so one cool thing about Hags in general is the Hag Eye, which is a tool Hags can use to spy on people. Now, in its item description, it stated that a Hag Eye is usually carried by a trusted minion, which is a fine and typical way to use one. You can give it to your Hag second in command, a minion patrolling your Hag's lair, have a minion infiltrate the party, or even have a minion pretend to be a merchant and sell a Hag Eye to your party, posing it as a magical item, allowing your Hag to continuously spy on your players. All these are great, but surely we can get spicier than that. Well, what if your Hags rip out their minion's eye and replace it with a Hag Eye to keep it more discreet? This is a metal as fuck way for your minions to demonstrate their loyalty. What if your Hags put one in a spyglass and give it to a pirate captain minion, allowing him and your Hags to spy on people at a great distance? What if your Sea Hag Eye had a special ability where it could connect to any body of water, whether it be an open sea or a tiny puddle? And this would allow it to conjure a translucent eye using the water's surface to spy on any creature standing near one. Getting a little more simple, you could just perch one up in a tree or hidden in some seaweed leading up to your Sea Hag's lair, so they can use it as a sort of security camera.
Hey, I'm Billy Big Mouth Vagina. Home on the range, where the big mouth vaginas feel strange.
Or you can go even wilder than that and set up dozens of Hag Eyes within 10 miles of your Hag's lair, giving them total surveillance coverage in the area. Now, we would have to axe this part of the Hag Eyes description, since if your players start destroying them, your Hags will die before the fun even begins. Although, admittingly, that would be kind of funny. And we would also have to axe the one Hag Eye rule as well. But I like the idea of our watery witches being wise enough to check in on the area surrounding them, so they can prepare for any surprises. However, if your players see a bunch of eyes everywhere, or even an eye dangling from a minion's neck, they're gonna catch on pretty quickly what it does. So what if our Hag Eyes weren't just eyes, but something more suited to our Sea Hag theme? So, Hag Eye customization number 1 is a preserved fish head the Hags can see through. Not only does it fit the theme and provide interesting and weird flavor, but if your players see a bunch of fish heads impaled on sticks, coral, or even entire fish bodies floating lifelessly in the water, it will create a lot of intrigue and possible engagement, since it's not something a player would typically see. At least in my campaigns. I don't know what weird shit you get up to, but hey, you do you, boo. So, can we get spicier than that? Well, yes we can, with Hag Eye customization number 2, a shark head with its eyes gouged out. Now you might be thinking, well, hold on, if its eyes are gouged out, what does it do? Well, sharks have an incredible sense of smell, particularly when it comes to blood. So if you plan a surprise combat encounter and have a monster slash one of your players, your Hag Eye, or should I say Hag Nose, can now smell the blood through any one of your dead shark heads and track your players. Also, the imagery of a shark head with its eyes gouged out will surely confuse and perplex your players. I mean, is Is it a ritual, an offering, a very weird take on an Easter egg hunt? Who knows? And on top of that, now there's some counterplay involved, since the hags lose vision if your players completely heal their wounds. But I think we can get even wilder than that with Hag customization number 3, dolphin heads. Why dolphin heads? Well, dolphins can use echolocation, which allows them to gauge their surroundings using sound, essentially creating a hag ear. Not only will this intrigue your players, but having your dolphin heads randomly make clicking noises to create interpretable sound waves will be equal parts creepy and potentially hilarious. Now, hags don't only have eyes, but also minions, so let's talk about some spicy options. In the basic rules, Sea Hags are said to have marrow minions, which makes sense, and you can have a lot of fun with that, particularly if you use marrow shadow priests. But marrow don't have legs, which hinders any above water encounter ideas, unless you're going for comedy, because having marrow flap around like dumb fish absolutely can be entertaining. So if you don't want to run underwater encounters, an easy substitute for marrow are Sahuagin. Not only are they solid fishy minions, but they also have a precious commodity known as legs, allowing for above water interactions. Also, they have Sahuagin priestesses who have a decent spell list, Sahuagin barons who can easily serve as Sea Hag commanders, and Sahuagin can also control and ride sharks, which is badass. Tritons, bullywugs, sea spawn, and even evil sea elves are also all potential options for basic minions that work both in and out of water. And Ixit, Zatchedal, and evil merfolk are some nice underwater additions. But come on, we can get spicier than that. Well, for underwater encounters, you can use naiads and nereids. What's awesome about these creatures is when they're underwater, they can become completely invisible, creating tons of combat shenanigans when your players are being smacked around but don't know by who. I tried naiads once and I made them invisible until my players hit them with an attack. At that point, they bled, and that blood allowed my players to spot their location. This speeds up combat, and I thought it was a good way to reward my players' actions. Another great minion is everybody's favorite fishy people, the Kuatoa. Not only do they serve as solid basic minions, but they come with everybody's favorite piece of Dungeons & Dragons lore, which is Kuatoa can create gods. So having your Sea Hags magically manipulate your Kuatoa to get access to such a power could be quite a lot of fun, but I think the funniest way to integrate the Kuatoa is to have your Sea Hags watch the Kuatoa and wait for them to want to create a god, and then create some homebrew lore where your Kuatoa do so by some sort of ceremony. Then when it takes place, the Sea Hags show up and pretend to be the gods the Kuatoa created and earn their allegiance that way. Are there some questions to answer and plot holes to fill? Sure, but would it be worth it? Absolutely, because having your players try and convince the Kuatoa that their gods are fake could be so fun. Now, increasing the difficulty a bit, we of course have water elementals and myrmidons, if you have Sea Hags that are known to summon their minions. But another interesting option is scum. They're known to serve aboleths, but why not give them to Sea Hags as well? Because scum have an ability called Mind-Breaking Touch, which damages creatures and gives them disadvantage on wisdom saves. Not only will this allow your Sea Hags to land spells like Polymorph, but remember at the beginning when I talked about Sea Hags having a neutered power word kill? Well, guess what? That's also dependent on a wisdom save. So enjoy insta-downing your players, you evil person. Sea zombies are also cool if you're going for a necromantic flavor, but another cool creature is a rusalka. What's a rusalka? Well, it's traditionally from Slavic folklore, but it's also from D&D 3rd edition, and essentially they're a variation of mythology siren-like creatures, using their beautiful voice to charm and lure people. So have one or two work for your Sea Hags and charm one of your players into the depths of the ocean. And finally, we have have hulking crabs and dark mantles. But what's cool about both these creatures is they are camouflaged when they're not moving. So have your crabs and dark mantles disguise as rocks or colorful coral and plop them around your hag lair for some spicy ambushes. Personally, I've put dark mantles on top of hulking crabs, so when the crab attacks, the players think they're just fighting a crab and then boom, a dark mantle pops out and wraps its tentacles around the player's face, which is always good fun. Now, let's talk about Sea Hag Lairs. A lair is heavily dependent on a creature's personality, so instead of going on for days theorizing about potential Sea Hag personalities, this section will be relatively quick, as I share just a few more general ways to bedazzle your water witch quarters. So, other than decorating your lair with objects and shenanigans that reflect your Sea Hag's personality, the main property of Hag Lairs is they are twisted by hag magic and come alive to defend themselves from invaders. So, what are some cool Sea Hag flavor options we can create? Well, the water can turn different colors and consistencies to bind and poison your players. The sand on the ocean floor can contort, shoot up, and drag your players below, restraining them in place. You know all those dead animals posing as hag eyes floating around? Well, what if they rot and explode, sending guts everywhere, dealing damage and potentially poisoning your players? What if seaweed shoots out and wraps around your players' eyes to blind them, or their throats to prevent speech? What if the water around your Sea Hag's lair creates creatures itself, like water weirds or slithering trackers? How about the sea itself starts pushing against your players and displacing them, and they have to figure out a way to fight through it? What if there was a coral maze leading to the lair, but it ended up being a magical maze your players can't escape from unless they take a very specific path, and each time they choose the wrong path, they take necrotic damage as their life force is drained. Basically, anything and everything can be used as a tool for destruction, so long as you come at it from the right angle. And I think a cool way to incorporate these extra features is by also making them lair actions the Sea Hags can use if they have access to their coven magic. Now, if you're not looking to go underwater, you can simply have your Sea Hag lair be located in a coastal cave or whatever. But if you do want to go underwater and don't want to have to worry about underwater combat rules, you can easily have a wizard cast a spell on your players that nullifies the restrictions, or have your players craft special breathing apparatuses made from magical underwater plants, or whatever else. Restrictions can lead to lots of combat fun and ingenuity, but if you don't want to deal with it, that's fine too. Next, let's move on to the hags themselves. Currently, Sea Hags are only CR2 creatures, although that increases when they have access to their coven magic. But depending on how you homebrew, you can easily run them at higher levels. I mean, I ran a challenging Sea Hag encounter just a few weeks ago for a party of 4 level 10 players and their 2 NPC companions, so it's definitely doable. The main thing to look at, other than manipulating their stats and spell DCs, is customizing their coven magic spell list. Now, whole person, counterspell, and polymorphing your players into goldfish or plankton can be quite joyous. But come on, we can spice this up. Well, if you're underwater, spells like Control Water and Wall of Water are great flavor options for that sweet, sweet battlefield control. And adding a repeatable saving throw to Water Walk and using it on your players would be goofy as hell, as they unwillingly zip up to the surface. But also, simply giving your Sea Hags control over the water around them can create some cool effects, like displacing your players by pushing them closer or further away, changing the clarity of the water to create limited vision, creating a small current that impedes movement against it but increases movement going with it, and so much more. Also, if you're fighting on a coastline, you can have your hags create tidal waves that engulf your players and drag them into the sea. Or your hags can create giant watery hands, weapons, or objects out of the water and use it to bludgeon your players. And you know what every campaign isn't complete without? That's right, dick jokes. So, I don't know, if you got horny hags, summon a giant aquacock and hurl it at your players. I don't give a shit. Get your Aquacock token below. You can also give your Sea Hags spells like Animate Objects, where they sling shells and pieces of coral at your players, or spells like Conjure Animals and summon sharks to bite your players, or giant octopuses to restrain them. Have a halfling in your party? Summon a giant frog and have it swallow them. The possibilities are plentiful. But can we get even spicier? Of course, because you can give your hags the ability to morph or partially morph into sea creatures themselves. One could transform their head into a shark head and get access to Blood Frenzy. One could transform their arms into octopus arms and restrain your players on hit. One could transform their stomach and tongue into frog-like ones and swallow your players, and so on and so on and so on. I personally made Sea Hags called Granny Barracuda, Auntie Leech, and Sister Urchin. I gave Granny Barracuda a powerful bite to multi-attack, I gave Auntie Leech a vampiric leech ability that healed her for the damage dealt, and I gave Sister Urchin a spiky fist attack that dealt poison damage and poisoned players on a failed con save. So, now that we have some spicy Sea Hags, what are some ways we could integrate them into a campaign? Well, there are endless possibilities, so here are just a few. Maybe your Sea Hags could have taken control over the waters near a fishing village, and now force the villagers to make offerings. And depending on the offering, the hags either increase or decrease the fish population, and so your players are hired to hunt them down. Maybe your players are taken on an aboleth, and it's enslaved a coven of Sea Hags to get access to their coven magic. And so to deal a blow to the plans of your aboleth, your players need to deal with the hags. Maybe your players are trying to track down a Marid, which is an underwater genie, and he's particularly difficult to find. But some Sea Hags are known to possess magic able to locate him, and so your players have to force or bargain with the Sea Hags to find out where he is. Maybe powerful Sea Hags are using coven magic to summon and take control of a kraken, and so your players need to stop him before some real craziness begins. Maybe some Sea Hags are causing storms in order to crash ships they can plunder. Are they just greedy or after something specific? It's up to you to decide. Maybe Sea Hags are casting curses on people that slowly turn them into animals they can bend to their will, and maybe one of your players fell under such a curse. And finally, the weirdest idea is based on a piece of Hag lore that states hags steal and eat children, and then birth children that look the same only for them to transform into hags 13 years later. So I think it would be absolutely wild if a group of hags placed a spell on an entire town to knock them out so they could steal all the children, eat them, birth new children, replace them, and then wait 13 years for the entire town to be overrun by an army of hags. Whether your players are trying to stop it or show up afterwards, I'll leave up to you, but it's definitely one messed up idea. But, of course, these are only a handful of ways you can spice up your Sea Hags. If you have any other ideas, toss them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching and indulging my hidden nerdy side.